Vedas, the four Vedas. And from four Vedas, then there is description in the prior verses about the different activities or different sacrifices. And in this verse, we are going to discuss about the social culture which was created to really shape our
the
future.
four Vedas.
So, so this situation where Brahmaji, after creating various different personalities, he wants to provide a social structure. And when the need for social structure came into picture, he created through the principles by Purna Purushottam Krishna, as mentioned in Bhagavad Gita as well, something what we all know as Varnashram Dharma. So as you know, Varnashram Dharma is a actually a matrix between two axes. One is the Varna, which is Brahmana, based on the skills of a particular person. Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudras. And then Ashrama, or the phase of everyone's life. So if you think about yourself, you are probably in one of these IJ parameter of Varna. Based on your skills, you are either a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudras. And then as the phase of life, you are either a Brahmacharya or Grihastha, Vanaprastha, or Sannyas. And most of us actually are falling in the paradigm of Grihastha in the x-axis. As you can see, when we're performing service, we are often referred as Brahmanas, but we are, as you know, in most of the jobs we perform, we're mostly service providers in the form of whether it's IT or whether it is restaurant or any form or shape. We are service providers, and by definition, we are actually Sudras. So, so in this context, most of us are in that x-axis pertaining to a grihastha. Sometimes we are performing the duty of a brahmana, or sometimes as we are service providers, we are Shudras. So here, the aspect of brahmacharya, which is essentially the first row and the first column, the axis over here, is explained so beautifully by Maitreya Muni as to when a person takes up brahmacharya, he is essentially, and he is a brahmana. As so, after the Vedas were formed in the prior verse, Maitreya Muni is going on to explain how Brahmaji created this Varnashram Dharma, and then he went on to identify some personalities who can maintain focus. And in order to maintain focus, what is mentioned here is the person has to control, or rather abstain from the sex life. So whenever there is a discussion around sex life, the focus around purity, the focus around trying to gather information from Vedas is often degraded. So here Maitreya Muni is saying the next step after creation of Vedas is to create a cultural system in the form of Varnashram, and then the Brahmacharya is essentially a, a skill and a phase of life which a person has to go through. A person after the thread ceremony, generally it is mentioned that when the thread ceremony is done, the person gets a second life, or he's twice born, as it's mentioned by Srila Prabhupada in his translation, and he completely abstain from the sex life. And then he maintains livelihood by asking for alms for the services he provides, or one which is rejected by others. So the quality of brahmacharya is very strict, and we have exemplary brahmacharis in our sampradaya as well, who have lived in this sampradaya for many, many years. Some of you know about many sannyasis who come to our temple, or the sannyasis who have maintained celibacy for the last 50 years, and they have maintained that purity for so long. And then Srila Prabhupada goes on to say that his Guru Maharaj, Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Goswami, is a Naistika Brahmachari. At the time when Gaudiya Vaishnava was formed, and when couples used to come to meet Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, then Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to have a curtain, and the ladies from the couple used to be on one side, and the husband used to come and meet, because the principles of Brahmacharya, as it is mentioned in the student life, they have to inculcate that ability to celebrate themselves, is so focused that Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to maintain a very high standard of, of, of life, wherein there is no attraction of any form or shape, and they are permanent brahmachari. So here many of our sannyasis have mentioned about family encumbrances. So what happens is, once the brahmacharya sets in, a person may tend to lack focus, and those folks who lack focus, those prabhus who lack focus, they are often let to go and create family and progenies. And after the families are created, then based on our method of the practice, we are often asked to do devotional service, and devotional service increases our higher taste. So, with reference to this purport 6.13 from Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada says, 6.13 and 6.14, Srila Prabhupada writes, one has to practice controlling the mind and avoiding all kinds of sense gratification, of which sex life is the chief. And in the rules of celibacy written by great says Yajñavaka, it is mentioned karmana manasa vacha sarvavastu sarvada sarvatra maithuna tyaga brahmacharyam prachaskate. That means the vows of brahmacharya is meant to help one completely abstain from sex, indulgence in work, words and mind, all at time, under all circumstances and in all places. But how do we dovetail this? We are grihasthas, and how does this concept of brahmacharya applies to us? That's the bigger question. Because the application of brahmacharya principles can be applied in our grihastha life if we abstain from sex, even by being a grihastha. And that is what is called as higher test. That's where, so in Bhakti school, a householder brahmachari, we are, most of us are aspiring devotees or sadhakas. A householder brahmachari is allowed controlled sex life, because the cult of bhakti yoga is so powerful that one automatically loses sexual attraction being engaged in the superior service of the Lord. So the bhakti or the devotion is so supreme that just being service to Sri Sri Radha Sam Sundar Jagannath Baldev Subhadra and Gaur Nitai, you generate such a higher taste that even in the grihastha life, you dovetail into a householder brahmachari, and you are unaffected by what is presented here. So what Maitreya Muni is saying here can be applied in our life. Just because some of you are married doesn't mean you cannot practice brahmacharya in the context of the bhakti school, as mentioned by Srila Prabhupada in his purport. So in Bhagavad Gita, it is said, Visaya vinivartante niraharshadehina rasavarjam rasoapyascha param drushta nivartate. That means where others are forced to restrain themselves from sense gratification, a devotee of the Lord automatically refrains because of superior taste. We have that higher taste. Other than the devotee, no one has any information of the superior taste. So by being in service of the Lord, even if you are a grihastha, but the concept of brahmacharya can be applied in our lives in many different ways. And the progenies can be applied in doing service, and at the same time, the person, when he dovetails all his attraction to the supreme, because whenever there is a superior attraction, the inferior attraction is receded from the mind. Say, for example, if you have, you know, if you have liking for milk sweets, if you have rasgulla, which is considered a milk sweet, and if there are non-milk sweets, you probably don't have that much interest. You have interest for the higher taste, which is rasgulla. So likewise, if there is a higher taste in our life, even in our grihastha life, we can dovetail our actions and activities into brahmacharya practice. And that is very important when Srila Prabhupada goes on to explain about the social structure or the Varnasrama Dharma, that that as brahmacharya, as brahmacharis who maintain a very strict practice, which is excellent. And if you can do that, some of our brahmacharis and our ISKCON Gaudiya Sampradaya takes to that higher taste of staying uh, alone and maintaining celibacy all their life, which is excellent. But as the 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 age of this Kali is progressing, even our brahmacharis are facing challenges in the face of this. And there are numerous temples where the changing of the ashrama is being seen. But but that is not a showstopper in our practice to bhakti. Practice to bhakti can be generated with a higher taste, staying in the confines of Varnashram Dharma. So, so this verse is such a beautiful verse. It goes on to explain how the principles of brahmacharya can be applied in our day-to-day life in practicing bhakti. So here, Brahmaji uh, goes on to create Vedas, and the people who would end up reading the Vedas are often the brahmacharis who go to gurukuls to practice that aspect of remaining celibate and focusing the full attention on the Vedas, so that they can learn, they can learn, and they can learn and not lose focus. And it is often very strict, uh, and and they completely abstain from the sex life, thereby maintaining purity in their focus, and their mind doesn't wander. So so when a child is born in our society, and the parent often goes on to celebrate his, whenever the child blabbers, you know the the dad goes on to say he's talking like Krishna. And often it really becomes very wonderful seeing the kid developing. But after 4, 5, 6, 7 years, when it often becomes a regulation activity, the mother and the father loses interest from a wonderful life. It becomes very wandering, as uh, it becomes very difficult for them to have a focus. And that is where, in order to bring all this focus into one spot, into the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to arouse that sense of love, the activity of devotional service is is created uh, and is professed so beautifully by Prabhupada, that even staying in the confines of Grihastha, we can maintain that higher taste, wherein you lose interest subsequently in in a sex life. So even if you're staying together as couples, you constantly do devotional service. And that is exactly why some of our gurus have mentioned that whenever we are representing ISKCON, we have to make sure that we are doing deity service, we are doing pujari service, or we're doing some service. We have to make sure that we are representing ISKCON. So in our Facebook page or WhatsApp profile, if we end up giving an impression where it is not devotional and it is totally unfavorable to devotion, then it gives a very negative impression to outsiders. Malati Mataji once mentioned to our temple community when we went for priest training that whenever you are becoming priests, you have to make sure that you are representing the deity or you are representing the temple and you are indirectly representing ISKCON. So when you do that, don't make your Facebook profile page something which you are not, because there you are not representing ISKCON well. So we have a responsibility in our hand to really showcase and maintain what is being said here, because unless we apply these verses and on this beautiful day of Ekadasi, these powerful words, then we will never help ourselves. The intent, because this process of our life is to uh, is to cleanse ourselves from our repeated birth. And if we do not take the opportunity to maintain what is professed in all these verses, we are not going to learn anything. So our Srila Prabhupada, uh, when uh, when different Westerners in 1965-66 used to join, Prabhupada used to always say, first you become conscious. First you become conscious of the dealings. First you become conscious of relationship. First you become conscious. And after you become conscious, then you'll become Krishna conscious. Srila Prabhupada mentioned that this day-to-day dealings of different boys and girls, or however you may or any form of orientation which is prevailing is very important, because we are representing a big society, and if we do not stay focused and be conscious of different prabhus, different matajis in our society, then it gives a very challenging scenario to outside. So whenever the Westerners used to join, the first thing they ended up doing is to think about the kind of relationship. Don't look up or look down on certain people in a manner which is not respectful, and which has a low self-esteem. So, mm, so, so originally the focus was. That's the reason why Krishna mentions yad acharati shrestha, because we are representing. Suppose a president of a country behaves in a very challenging manner. He doesn't. The subjects of the kingdom are not going to follow properly. That's the reason why our superiors are supposed to be held at very high standards. Otherwise, the yad acharati shrestha, which Krishna professes, accordingly our subjects behave. So if our achar is not proper, Srila Prabhupada is the founder acharya. Through his actions, through his acharan, he lived a legacy, and he is an inspiration for so many years. Likewise, if this generation doesn't go through that process of showcasing acharan to others, and we have challenges in some temples, in this Kali Yuga. It's the age of quarrel and hypocrisy, and a lot of these temples, some of these temples are going through a lot of turmoil when a person who has maintained 20-30 years of brahmacharya, when they leave the ashram, it becomes a very so the aspect is not to really create a lot of devotees. The aspect is to create quality devotees, so that we are very strong in our methodology, in our practice, and in our Krishna consciousness. Unless we become very, very strong, because sometimes you might have seen our acharyas are very particular about waking up, taking birth, then doing mangalarti. Our process is very strict and is very good. It's proven. And actually, there are some CEOs, they admire Srila Prabhupada because there is not a single organization where everything starts at 4:30 in the morning. When they see that the many CEOs they see, we ISKCON is an example, because in every temple the Lord wakes up without any issue at 4:30. That means the focus is there in our practice. The more strong we stay within the practice, without really counting on how many devotees or how many first initiates we make, it speaks a lot about our quality. It's all about quality, not quantity. So, so, so this verse touches on some of the very close tenets of brahmacharya, and how maintaining brahmacharya is very critical. And I just want to end here by saying that even within the confines, even with the confines of grihastha ashram, we can maintain we can maintain um, householder brahmachari principles in dealing with dealing with uh, dealing with dealing with day-to-day activities, so that we stay focused in a higher taste. And in staying with the higher taste, we not only feel blissful, but we devoid ourselves of all these anarthas. And one such anartha, Maitreya Muni is saying, is the sex life, which is often not discussed, but it's very important that we develop a higher taste, so that this aspect can be kept aside. And like the brahmachari, we remain focused as a householder brahmachari, and we focus on trying to be very strong in our sadhana, not get diverted by uh, by by our sensual desires, and and maintain the brahmacharya, because brahmacharya is all about is all about trying to stay focused in maintaining celibacy, so that we can focus on the wonderful scriptures, the Vedas, and so-called principles. And if we remain celibate, there is an additional power. That's why the people who have remained single in their life, they definitely owe a very strength, because they have maintained, they have control. So it's not a question of weakness that a person has stayed single or remained brahmachari. It's actually on the contrary, it's a very strong pursuit. So anybody who has maintained that, personally try to have, because whenever I have seen, our brahmacharis, they end up doing arati in our temple, it brings up that element of honesty, and brings a lot of people into focus, that how pure we are as a system. In comparison to that, if we have someone who has a Facebook page which doesn't really align with her, it doesn't really give a good impression. So we have so many wonderful single sadhakas who are controlling and powerfully demonstrating why this Bhakti Yoga is worth a try, not only life, but life after life. So with that, like to end here. We can go on and on, but have a wonderful Ekadasi, and Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any question, comments, or reflections, we can take it in the group. And wishing you all the best for a pure Ekadasi, and hope you stay Grihastha Brahmacharis all your life by serving the Supreme of Sri Radha Samsno Jagannath Baldev Subhadra and Gaur Nitai.